Hello, my name is Dutra-Smith. I know that normally that's either the Positive Masculinity podcast or Rhetorical Rumble. We're gonna do an interview podcast now with my new friend Kevin. He runs a YouTube video called Treetop Treaties, which I'll be linking down in the description. Please click on it. He just interviewed me. I will be so my interview will be there, and he also makes really good video essays so far. And I think you're pivoting more to interview content as well, right?
A little bit of everything, yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be great. Yeah, so I would really recommend it. We're gonna be referencing his higher education video. I watched that one. It's very, very good. So I would very much recommend everyone go checking that out. I actually will probably link that video down in the description as well. And yeah, so let's get started. So Kevin, tell me about yourself. What's your university major, for example?
Yeah, I'm 22. I'm a Canadian. I'm a psychology major, and basically, I got really sad after the American election. I thought the world was kind of going in a different way, and then I was kind of in my feels for a bit, and then I decided to make a video about it, called like the Democratic Autopsy, and it detailed like what I think like went wrong for the Harris campaign, or like what was going on in like the minds of the voters and what was going on in my mind, and and basically I kind of just like really enjoyed making that video, and so like over like the past like month I've been doing like more research and finding out like ways to like make other video essays, and I've been enjoying it, and then I randomly got recommended other channels, such as this one, that got me interested in talking to other people that might be interested in this stuff at like the same similar like small channel size. So now I kind of want to do more like interviews too, to talk to people that I agree or disagree with, and kind of broaden my ideas and horizon, and get more ideas to make good videos about.
Uh, okay, sorry, good. You said, sorry, miss. So you said make more videos about what, or just more videos, just
Just in
in general?
general, I mean,
Okay, right.
traditionally, like I'm interested in like politics and like psychology.
Gotcha. Yeah.
If I had to go back, I would probably be a poli sci major, but like I'm in my
Okay.
fourth year, so I'm a little bit sunk cost fallacied into finishing psychology. But yeah, like I'm interested in all things like Canadian policy, U.S. policy, foreign policy, philosophy, psychology, all that good
Mhm.
stuff.
So what goes on in Canadian politics? Like why
Nothing.
like
That's why I'm talking to. That's why I'm talking about American politics. It's so boring in Canada. We all wish we had
um
the reality TV show. Uh, I'll give a more serious answer than that. Yeah. Um, our big issues in Canadian politics right now have to do with like the housing crisis, which the Americans will be familiar with. We just haven't kept up with building like infrastructure in like the past couple of years, and I kind of make this joke that while America does have an immigration problem and it needs to be fixed, Canadians actually have it much worse. But it's specifically actually has to do with like international students and foreign worker visas. And to be clear, I don't believe it was done out of like malicious intent from like the Canadian government, because we needed a ton of like labor, and like we've always loved to have like international students come and be a part of Canada, and there was a big reason for that, to bring to basically like open the gates like after COVID, because we needed like a bigger workforce. But basically, we kind of just like overdid it a bit, and it's placed a big strain on healthcare and like housing, and specifically like student housing. And there's been a there's been like a lot of controversy about it, because now the Canadian politicians are like cutting back, or like they're putting caps on like how many international student visas we're gonna like offer like every year. Before, like it was like basically like uncapped, and we had We had like a bunch of like diploma mills basically capitalize on it, because the thing is we can charge international students basically 3 times the amount that they charge domestic students. And since universities kind of were struggling with funding because the government was not funding them appropriately, they kind of had the bad incentives to go after international students through various agencies. And then obviously there's a lot of international students that want to study in Canada and find work in Canada, because Canada's a great, awesome, free country with lots of economic opportunity. So you can kind of see how that bad incentive like goes both ways. Like the students want to like recruit, or the universities want to recruit the international students and kind of use them as like pay pigs. And then the international students are willing to pay that premium to come over. But now we have such a big influx of international students and foreign workers coming to Canada that it's just very public, and it's created a lot of negative vibes in the discourse for a good reason and bad reason.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I totally understand that. We have a very similar problem in the United States, right? We get a lot of international students. My wife is an international student, actually. So yeah, I understand the pluses and minuses of having both. I understand that there's like a fine game you play when it comes to how many international students you let in versus your own native population, and like, is that good? Is that bad? Do you want your whole economy to become just like giving out education to international students, or would you want it to be like something a little more functional, or right? And then a big question that popped up in my head though is, why not allow more immigrants that are lower skilled laborers, right? If you need more housing, that requires a lot of low skilled labor. So like,
Yeah,
what
it does.
happens?
Specifically, the housing thing, like it doesn't really have to do with like a lot of the labor restrictions. Like it has to do with like a lot of just like municipal what are they called? Like bylaws. Like it's not the lack of workers. It's just like a lot of stupid zoning restrictions and like red tape, right? It's like, oh, like the tape measure, like your parking lot can only be this big, or like, sorry, like you can't build like a house here. Like this is shopping front only. So it's just like a really bunch of really dumb red tape that needs to be like addressed. And that's kind of coming down the line, but it's just a lot of bureaucratic bloat that the public isn't really that well informed about. So it's complicated to talk about, but a lot of it is just like bad zoning regulations, and it's not necessarily a labor thing.
That's a huge problem in San Diego, where I live as well. So like, yeah, like the NIMBYs are the scourge of our existence here.
For sure,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big YIMBY. Okay, yeah, like we have everyone voted no on this, and I don't know why, if they're complaining about how rent prices were. But here, I think it was 2022, they were trying to get rid of the cap on you could only make an apartment 5 stories high. You try to get rid of the cap,
Yeah.
and everyone voted no on it. And I feel like I was the only person who was like, wait, we gotta. There it is. There's our solution to our problems right now.
Yeah, basically.
Like, yeah.
Very similar story here.
So, but
once people got it, they are very fond of pulling up the ladder.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. What did I say? I said I used the phrase "cutting the rope." You know, like you're climbing up the mountain on the rope. And
Yeah.
Um, but let's see, what else do we have before we get into like the meat? Trying to. So you mentioned in your interview with me that you did a lot of curling. So you do curling, and you do pickleball, and any hobbies like that or anything?
Yeah, I mean, my big hobbies are those two. I do tennis in the summer. I do a fair bit of I play a good amount of Magic, both like Magic Arena and like I play Commander with my friends. I like to spend a lot of time reading various like book recommendations I generally get from like podcasts. Like I'm a big like Ezra Klein fan, so a lot of
okay.
a lot of the like Ezra Klein does like book recommendations at the end of his podcasts, and I end up liking to go into a lot of those or like listen to the authors that write those. Um, yeah, those are basically my hobbies.
Nice.
I used to be a League player. I
A
still
League
play like
player?
some various like the League games or like indie games. Like I've been playing Hades 2 more recently. I enjoy that.
Okay.
But like the biggest game of my childhood was I was playing League. I was an Evelyn main. I hit Diamonds 2 was my peak.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I know some of the lingo, and I know Diamond 2 is like not a joke. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like top like 1.5% or something.
Yeah.
At the time I was
Yeah.
Diamond, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I got into Marvel Rivals recently that just came out.
Yeah,
Have
yeah.
been
It's all the rage. All my friends are playing it.
It's
If I wasn't
so
working on
much
these
fun.
videos, I would install it and lose my life over it.
If you do, message me your username. We'll play
No,
together.
we'll play sometime for sure.
Yeah. Um, okay, let's get into the actual the meat. Um, so you made a video talking about all the problems you have with how higher education works in both America and in Canada. They're kind of tied. They have a very similar higher education system in general, right?
Hmm.
Um, so let's start with primary education. Like, uh, do you think that primary education should be creating some degree of discipline? I know you mentioned that like a lot of uh, a lot of primary education now is like it's just made to pump out workers, right? Essentially, like make little drones. I'm paraphrasing you, obviously, your video. But do you think that there should be some degree of like getting them to be able to do a normal work schedule and live like a normal life in primary education?
I mean, like I'm definitely in favor of like schedule and routine. Like that's the element of the factory that I actually don't mind or like I like the best. Like we all kind of operate on a 24-hour clock and we have to learn to work within like the daylight hours traditionally. But yeah, the big point I raised in that video is that the schools operate too much like factories and like they treat kids like drones basically to pump them out in like the industrial in the industrial era. But like it turns out that a lot of the actual predictors for success for like children um, don't necessarily actually have a lot to do with like how they're educated, at least in the current system, because children are just obviously like more organic, and I take a lot from like Ken Robinson's famous TED talk in that video, and how his preferred vision and my preferred vision is like that schools are more like gardens that try to emphasize more like the environment that actually produces like good students and and like widens the horizon of like what makes a good student or like a good worker. So like instead of just like good grades and like good like attendance and being able to like listen to the teacher, like there's there's a lot of other metrics that employers value, like collaboration, like resilience, and like critical thinking, and um, things like that that aren't properly measured by like the current like standardized tests. So yeah, I would like for specifically like primary education, I would say like one of the big things that you could like ask yourself is to get you thinking about this kind of thing and like what kind of changes you might want to see in the system is like is there a good reason that we educate kids primarily by like age, or like in the video he puts it kind of funny, it's like by date of manufacture. It's like we educate kids in like batches, but like it's kind of just like dumb because not all 4-year olds are the same, not all 8-year olds are the same. Like they have different talents in like different areas and different interests, right? So like that's one way you could explore some interesting solutions to have like multi-age classrooms, or to have like older kids with younger kids instead of this very batch like factory system that we have in place now.
Yeah. In science, we have lots. When you make new batches of things, they're the lot, right?
Yeah.
So even if yeah, yeah. I don't know why it just reminded me of that. Um, but going on to the going off of the mixing people of different ages up, mixing children of different ages up. Do you know what the No Child Left Behind Act is?
Um, I'm vaguely familiar. Like it's like some like American policy that ended up leaving a lot of children behind. It was basically like didn't it like it just placed like more emphasis on like the standardized testing and like it tried to bring everyone's scores up. Oh, okay, you can tell me about
So
it.
so it it took away money from disadvantaged children when they didn't score well, right? Effectively, this is not literally what the wording says, but essentially what ended up happening was if a kid got bad grades, if too many kids in your school district got bad grades, right, your school would get less funding. So what they did was they made school easier and never held anyone back. And so every kid got passed forward, and you had more kids graduate high school that probably shouldn't have graduated high school. Right?
Okay, so this was like grade inflation, basically.
Yeah,
Okay,
basically.
interesting.
So I just was thinking about that because now even it doesn't only work one way. And now apparently it's not working the other way, where like you can't even skip grades. Like there's some kids who used to be able to skip grades when I was a kid. There was one kid who graduated eighth grade when they were like I want to say they were like 11 or something, so like 3 years ahead of time.
Right.
That doesn't happen anymore. Um, and so yeah, I mean that definitely contributes to like the data manufacturing problem that you were talking
Yeah,
about.
it's just so clear to anyone that's ever like been a teacher, ever been in a classroom, like anyone that's ever observed a group of children that like not all children are the same despite their age. Like there are really smart children that should be given the opportunity to move faster than their peers, and then there are other peers that need more help or need other activities to find their talents or to excel in. So yeah, like the lot like batch like system, it it's just old. It's old and it worked a little bit for its intended purpose, but we can think of better purposes now.
I also think we're getting too specialized as human beings. Like the different types of things that we can be good at, different types of jobs are like maybe they're too different, right? Like now, like before in the 1800s when school was invented, adults couldn't read at the kindergarten level, right? It's like now, like maybe you can just barely scooch over with your reading comprehension, but your science is really good or something. Or I guess maybe reading comprehension isn't a good thing. Your ability to analyze like fictional literature or something versus your um versus like your ability to like understand a scientific idea. Maybe those two things aren't equal. So maybe you're way advanced in one and not advanced in the other.
Yeah, or it's hard to parse out because I'm not too sure about the historical literature, but yeah, maybe I do get the sense that we are over specialized or like we're creating very one dimensional workers, both because of grade inflation and even just degree inflation. Like more people have degrees than they used to, so degrees both mean less, and like employers still like the base level to get in the door is still like the bachelor's. So like everyone has to have a bachelor's now. So but then now everyone's got a bachelor's, so you have to get a master's, and then you have to get like a PhD, and then even then like maybe you're over specialized or like the employers still don't want to hire you. So it's just it's created really bad culture for both job seeking behavior and for employers, and and the people that end up being very specialized and maybe not having a more full complete education, maybe they didn't get to take as many electives as they wanted, they aren't particularly well rounded in reading or the humanities, or if they are really well rounded in the humanities, then they lack in some other area, right? So I would agree that I think the system is producing less well-rounded citizens than it used to, maybe.
Yeah, I was saying the opposite, but
Oh,
also
okay.
it's neither producing well-rounded citizens or specialized enough citizens to where there's a trade-off for it, right?
Okay.
We're
So
not
so you
optim
want it to produce more specialized citizens, or
it, we need to optimize for one or the other. We're getting like kind of the worst of both worlds right
oh,
now,
okay, I get it. Yeah.
right? Like your idea is still better than what we're doing, but I was saying that we should like, okay, cool, you're good at science and not good at English. Cool, we're going to put you in remedial English. We're going to put you in hyper advanced science, and then we're going to
Yeah,
play to your
yeah,
strength.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's mostly just like whatever you want your school or university to do, and you can have different ideas as to how to do this. That's why we have like different schools and we have the pluralist school system or private school system. It's just like pick a mission and focus on it. Don't because if you try to do all these different things, you're just going to fail at all of them.
But the problem is I don't agree that like it's doing any like I don't know. At least in America, I don't.
Yeah, yeah, it isn't doing anything well because
Yeah.
I think in America especially, but also can't like yeah, no, we agree. We're in agreement here. Like it's not doing anything well, but I don't think it's like out of malicious or like bad teachers necessarily. Like it's just I think it's just got too many missions. Like there's so many responsibilities on schools now. Like they both have to be like liberal indoctrination centers, and they have to like get you a job, and they also have to like they have to promote, you know, like equality, and equality is a good thing to promote. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
the social load for what schools are expected to do is just too much now. Like they have so many responsibilities, and also they just lack funding. That's just a big part. Your teachers are not paid well and not respected well enough for society to deal with the BS of everyday students.
Right. And I think we can sort of separate primary and secondary schools as far as problems. I think attacking those things are very different, right? Because like
sure.
primary school is like, okay, it's on top of all that. Once a school finally usually does figure out a problem, here comes some parent talking about how, you know, I understand that we had too many teen pregnancies, but we can't teach sex education now. And it's like,
Yeah.
then just don't. Then you talk to your child and you tell them not to have sex. Okay, we got to keep the kids in the classroom. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we shouldn't be crafting rules around the exception.
Exactly, I agree with you. Yeah, like for my high school, the first high school I went to, the women were known for being very promiscuous, very very much so.
Right.
And
wait, can I just have? Did you go to like a Catholic school?
No,
okay,
no,
okay.
There was one down the road.
Okay, that's funny because here for us, it's like I think our Catholic schools are more promiscuous than the non ones. Or like that's the stereotype.
That's usually how it is here too, but there's just one that just particularly is like that.
Okay.
But we only learned abstinence, and I was like,
crazy.
Hey man, what's going on here? Like, most of the girls in this class right now that you're teaching abstinence to we're already past that. Okay, that ship has already sailed.
Right.
And we're freshmen in high school. It's only going to get worse. Like you need to fight the battles you can win. So yeah, if that makes sense. And then for secondary school, I do also think, you know, in your talk, we'll get into more of it a little bit later, but you talked about how they become like liberal indoctrination centers. You made a reference to that earlier, right? Even as a liberal, like it should be about learning ideas, right? It should, you know, yeah.
Yeah, like the tongue in cheek thing is that like they should be, but it should not be the purpose. It should be like the side effect, right? Exactly. It's like if education makes you more liberal by side effect, that's fine. Maybe even good, a liberal might say. But it's not the purpose, right? Like the purpose is to learn, or you can defer on the purpose, like because maybe there are different, like sometimes the purpose is to learn or become well-rounded. Sometimes the purpose is just to seek employment. Sometimes the purpose is to be highly specialized. Sometimes the purpose might be to learn how to become a good wife or childbearing citizen. Like there are different views on that, but I guess I would argue with most of them and say, generally, I think when we talk about schools, like we should be talking about how to make well-rounded citizens of the future that will propagate, that will have the skills necessary to both maintain like civil society and generally democracy, because I like that system better than anything else, and then also be able to like work and be GDP machines and maintain the economy.
Right. I would expand a little bit on the whole college being for a job and college being for a like an
Well-rounded
education
experience,
thing.
yeah, because they are
Yeah,
different things. You really have to hash that out.
because I very much went to college and I'm in student debt. Like it's a rough time. It's for a job. It was for a job. I
Yeah,
went there to get out and get a good career and be set in life, right? Even going, I knew that was the case, right?
yep,
Uh, and coming out, I actually like ended up going into a lot of these production places before I ended up at my current startup, where I'm like doing more like theoretical work, right? And I realized like I didn't. You don't need a job for any of these places. Like to do any production work, you almost don't need a college degree at all. And you could train anybody to do this. Like what? Why would you? I don't know. Like why would you pay like such an advanced rate for something that anyone can do if you just teach them a little bit? Like there's a little bit of things like pipetting that you learn in school, but like it doesn't teach for someone. It doesn't take very long to teach someone how to pipette.
yeah. If that's like the bare minimum, then yeah, like
Yeah,
there's no reason for someone to be $200,000 in debt for pipetting skills.
but that's what some of these jobs were, and it blew my mind coming in. Like I thinking that I'm going to go into these jobs and reinvent the wheel, and being like, I just need you to pipette all day every day because we can't afford to get a robot. I'm like,
That's funny.
okay, yeah, um, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like it's just, yeah. I think that. Why am I trying to? Sorry, I kind of lost my point a little bit. Like I agree with you that higher education should be about just the education and the love of learning and like teaching and like that type of thing. But we live in a society that for some reason almost overvalues college degrees, where you need a
Yeah,
college degree to do anything. And it's like it's just not. I don't know how to get back. If that makes sense. I don't know how to come.
yeah. Like there has to be a broader view of education too. That's not limited to the 4-year degree. That's why like a lot of people will advocate for like the trade schools or being entrepreneurial and like maybe finding like some kind of business loan. Well, and that's like maybe an interesting point because maybe the way the student loan system is structured, like it actually like forces people to go into that if they don't have the parents that can pay for it, because like you can't get a small business loan out of high school, but you can get a student loan, right? So
Yeah,
maybe that's something that could be like investigated, is like what kinds of restrictions might you be able to place on like a small business loan for like a high schooler that's like either like looking to just like get in the workforce or maybe like looking to um I don't know, like become some kind of self-starter and like find their own way to like educate themselves and provide like a good business idea or something. But that avenue is often just really hard for someone like with no credit history at like 18 out of high school and no direction. So it's difficult because the only direction we have is if you're smart, go to university and get a bachelor's, and if you're really smart,
and
go get a master's, and then go get a PhD,
right,
and,
and
and then and then we don't know what to do with you.
right, exactly. And then like even so, like to think about like how many people like didn't become writers or didn't become artists or didn't become uh I don't know what gender studies people are called, like what their profession is called, right? But didn't get to do these things and advance our culture or our literature or whatever because they couldn't afford to. Like there's no payoff for it, right? Like people constantly complain that there's no payoff for it, but like we've done no, I don't know. Yeah, there's just
Yeah,
there's no
we've invested such little cultural capital, or we shame those kinds of professions. Like the conservatives always complain about like the humanities or whatever, or they complain that they've like lost the culture war, or that like there's too much like liberal media. But it's also partly their fault for not going to these schools and like participating in like the culture and like trying to like build it up. So like as they retreat, justly or unjustly, like yeah, it makes sense that I don't know the humanities become more part of like the radical left in their sense, but it's kind of a
Yeah,
loss on both ends.
right. And it's actually ironic for a lot of conservatives because the cultural majors were their opportunity to break into higher education. Like in science, sorry conservatives, like it favors the libs. Okay, the Earth is round, global warming is happening. Okay, evolution is real. Like it just favors us. Like you're not going to come here and do all these science classes and you come out a conservative unless you just are resistant to learning or resistant to data, right?
Mm.
And so yeah, it's like that was their opportunity to like really break into higher education, and then they just were like, no, do all the STEM things, and they're like, and then they turn around at the same time after they send their kids into STEM, and they go, why is my kid coming back and he's a liberal? It's like, well, you sent him into the area where the ultimate liberal factory, the hard data liberal
Yeah.
factory. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, how you feel about that?
No, yeah, it is sad. Like it's I was gonna try and make the bike meme connection if you went there, but like it's like they're self-sabotaging, right? It's like why did we lose the culture war? But they they took out their bike wheel
Oh yeah,
spoke.
oh yeah.
That was the connection I was trying to make.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, the other dumb analogy is like like Hitler got rejected from art school. So it's it's that sad thing. It's like you have an opportunity to contribute to the culture and write the stories that you want to continue into the future. But if you want that, then and it's not that you have to go to the universities to do this. There are other avenues that you can do. But if you want to be around the people that are in those classes, then I guess university is the place. Unfortunately, right now, maybe there should be more places outside of university. But all the cultural capital is going to the universities. So if you want to be part of that developing cultural mythos, then then you have to go there and you have to participate and you have to talk to people and you have to enjoy their company. But if you don't go, then you can't complain about losing the culture war.
Right. It's for like the martial arts meatheads that definitely watch this podcast. Like it's like all the martial arts people that like, oh well, my students won't do mixed martial arts because it's not traditional and it's not like, it's not the way we do things. We only do traditional taekwondo or whatever. I'm not picking on taekwondo people, but and then they're like, well, no one's showing up to taekwondo class. Well, yeah, they didn't show up. They didn't participate in the mix. They didn't participate in the war of which martial arts is the best. Of course, no one is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, a good question I actually had because we've been kind of referencing it. It's been in the background of our conversation. Is do you think it's important to separate when we talk about these conversations, public and private schools?
Yeah. It's still a similar conversation for both of them, but sometimes it's useful to separate them. Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, my thing about the public and private schools is like when we're talking about public policy, like or like what to do about it. I think we're more talking about public schools. Like private schools can do whatever the hell they want. We might not like it, but it's like, what are we gonna do about it? I don't know. That's my perspective. I don't know if you feel the same way or.
Yeah. I just don't know as much because we don't have as many private schools in Canada. But yeah, basically, I guess like most of my policy positions I would advocate for is for to give or distribute funding accordingly to the education or like the school boards um, that do the things you want them to do or will buy into the incentives you offer them. Actually, here's a really good example: is you might have seen recently in the news, which state is Sarah Huckabee Sanders the senator for or whatever?
I think it's
Is it
Arkansas.
Arkansas? Okay.
Yeah.
I think her state is like the first one to implement it's some kind of like phone incentive where they're providing like a fund for school boards that can opt into this fund, but in order to like take this government money, they have to basically have like phone free schools and they have to enforce it. And it's pioneered by like Jonathan Haidt's like side of work, like the Anxious Generation. He's done great work on that. But like
Okay.
that's a really good example of like of good policy influencing the public schools, because and even the private schools too, because I think the private schools might be able to access this fund, but it's the government creating an incentive for a desirable behavior, which is phone free schools, but it's not forcing it on the schools. It's just the schools have to opt in if they want to access that money for their teachers and students.
Interesting. That's an interesting choice. I think there's probably trade-offs because like I remember in college, mostly in college, because that's when like the smartphone thing got really big, right? Um, I guess I started in 2015. Um, is like if you use phones correctly for school, like they can be a very powerful tool. But like yeah, for
They
young
can.
kids, are
Well, that's
probably
why I would separate like the university and like the primary schools or like the high schools maybe. I think the ban is specifically for like under 16.
oh
And
under 16.
I
Okay,
think like the argument is much stronger there because like yes, like the phones are tools and they can be used to give greater education outcomes, but as far as like the social outcomes and the educational outcomes for the children that like the iPad kids, the kids that spend so much time on their phones even during class, and like the teachers are like they're supposed to enforce it, but like they really can't do anything, right? Like depending on the teacher. Um, so yeah, I would just differentiate that.
okay.
Universities can have like a different policy though. Like could be arguments for them to try and have a more strict policy as far as social media use in their schools, but also at that point, like everyone going to university is an adult, so like
Yeah.
I think it's mostly for the public schools when there are
Okay.
vulnerable children being taken advantage of by big tech.
Yeah. 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 I think that maybe that needs. I don't know. Again, I think I talked to you about this before. Like I was in a different school district, so I utilized my phone in high school towards the latter half, like a lot, and for research purposes. Like I'd
Yeah,
find
it's
be
it's
finding
definitely a
science.
generational thing. I can tell. Like if you okay, because the biggest differentiating factor is whether or not you had the phone before puberty or after puberty, and like I'm kind
Really?
of on the further end too. I'm
Yeah.
22, so like I basically had the phone or like the early iterations of like social media and like Snapchat, and I was playing like Clash Royale in like grade 10 and 11 and 12, and it had somewhat of a probably negative effect on me where I was spending too much time on my phone in class, but even I'm like old enough that like I was on my way, like I had enough development and like social skills that compared to like the younger generation when they have it like before going into puberty, like those super important formative years and like grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, like those are really the kind of key areas when you're developing like your sense of self that like can really be screwed up by like the kinds of social media,
Okay.
especially for like teenage girls, right? Like with the body dysmorphia and like the body standards of, like Instagram, and also like the guys with some of the just like brain rot content and having poor depictions of women in like media or pornography, basically. So like that's why it's like a really sensitive period that I think most parents and children and like school teachers and like regulators should be able to agree on that. Um, this is not a good thing to have in like our schools, and it's cool to see like this is just starting. Did you hear about like the Australia social media ban?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I did.
like that's going to be like difficult to enforce, but like it's interesting. Like it's a starting point, and it just sends a signal out there. So that's going to be a big thing that we're talking about in the coming months and years is the debate over like social media and like phones in our schools and our children's lives.
Yeah. In one sense, I'm kind of like when Nikki Haley she mentioned something where she thinks that everyone should have to have like their ID on their social media profile, and so like it's you, so you can't just anonymously be inciting violence. Or first she said inciting violence, but even I think just like bullying, like you should be held like. I don't advocate for this because obviously there's other negative problems that arise when
Yeah,
you
there's
have
some
that.
pros to being anonymous online, but I can
Yeah,
see where the argument's going. Like there should probably be biometrics for people that are making public statements about public things.
right. Yeah, or even again, even just bullying somebody, even if you just like
Yeah,
the
like
meanest
if you're
comments.
harassing someone, like they're always anime profile pics or like always
No,
faceless or something.
yeah,
Sorry,
the
go ahead.
meanest ones are the default profile picture.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That they didn't even bother. They
it's
made
just the bot.
that
Yeah,
account exclusively just to say a rude thing about you, like
yeah,
rude thing about people.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I see that. I agree. In some senses, I agree with it, and in some senses, I don't. I almost wish we could figure out how to make like a PG-13 social media. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or like a PG-13 like algorithm. Like, yeah, there are good ways to do it probably, but I think the big thing now is that like big tech does not have an interest in doing that unless the regulators step in, right?
Yeah.
Because like there is YouTube Kids, but like YouTube Kids never would have happened. They would have just shown shorts to kids all day and like reveled in like advertiser money, which they're still doing now. But like
Yeah.
it's big tech's job to return value to shareholders and extract as much social and capital out of their consumers. That's what they're supposed to do as a corporation. And then ideally we're supposed to elect representatives that can address that threat of, late stage capitalism and, rein it in or be like, this thing is not okay. You cannot go over after young children as consumers, or you cannot
Right.
have a monopoly over this technology. So there's a lot of interesting conversations to be had here that I don't know enough about. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I've noticed that the culture has shifted because of how appetizers favor people. Is they all want to be everyone wants to be like PG-13, and because of that, I think maybe teenagers get grouped into areas that they shouldn't, even though like we're grouping down adults, right? We're kind of smashing those two groups of people together. And I think adults should be separate from teenagers. Teenagers are like not children, but they're definitely not adults either, right? They need their own space to prosper, I would say.
for sure.
Yeah. Even just like all the superhero movies. I'm a big comic book fan. I'm a big believer that there are certain Batman villains that you should not make a PG-13 movie out of. If the Joker appears in your movie, it should not be PG-13.
Yeah, I can probably agree with that. It's definitely
Yeah.
a tragedy of Marvel just, I don't know, like maybe dumbing down the villains, or they're just trying to shoot for like the broadest audience and sacrificing a little bit of their artistic capital or like the
Mhm.
integrity of the movie, which is
Yeah.
sad, but yeah.
Marvel is definitely worse than DC about it, but that's just because they're owned by Disney, right? That's the nature of Disney, right?
Or yeah. But yeah,
Um,
DC does it too.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's the total side note. So for going back to primary, I know that you mostly talk about university in your video, but like we're gonna go back to primary schools for a second,
Sure.
and then we'll go back to universities. So, do you think that in primary schools they should teach like basic classes for kids who won't make it to college, right? Like I in my civics and econ class, the number before we learned any econ, he made us learn how to make a budget. Like a good like 2 months was just like, here you're making minimum wage. You have to find somewhere in this county to like live by yourself and some minimum wage job for you to do, and you have to have like your whole budget budgeted out.
Um, it's I think it's difficult for me to answer that just because I don't know if I don't know the kinds of basic classes you'd be talking, or like life skills classes you're talking about,
Like just how
or
to make a like cooking. We never learned. We don't take home ec. We don't have home ec in in America anymore. That used to be a thing where you learn how to just cook basic meals for yourself so you can feed yourself. So you're not ordering DoorDash every day and then complaining that food is too expensive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's another pet peeve issue of mine. But Americans are complaining about inflation and yet spending 30% of their net worth on DoorDash.
Yeah.
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 But I mean, maybe I think the biggest thing with primary education is like at that point, I'm okay with giving everyone like a similar shot because I think it's kind of too early to say sometimes like, oh, this kid's not like cut out for university. We should just like put him in basic skills. Like, and that's mostly where I'd have like my argument is just like I don't know exactly when you can have the best predictors of like of a child's talent and like how much what classes they should be in and like whether or not they should be like university pathway or college pathway or like work pathway. Um I think we'll get better at figuring that out and finding kids' talents, but that's a whole like implementation problem that's going to be further down the road than the earlier things we're talking about.
Yeah, I was more just talking about like across the board, right? Like making school more about when you leave, when you like walk off the high school campus for the last time, you should be able to like kind of function by yourself, like setting it up for that.
Sure. I mean, I'd be all for like a budgeting class, and
Yeah.
like we have like it's not mandatory, but like we have like foods and like culinary classes in like our high schools. But the big question with all these things is like, okay, you put that in, what do you take out? Like, what are the trade offs?
Mhm.
And I don't. There's nothing actually that I'm so passionate about that like I think that should be taken out that I would like have to make room for those. But like it's like a efficiency like maybe I would take out like mandatory grade 11 or 12 math and then put in like a budget class or maybe I would make like foods class mandatory, but it's hard to say whether or not the grade 10 shouldn't have to take grade 11 math
Yeah.
because it can benefit them in other ways, but yeah.
Mhm. I understand. I think, well, in America, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but in America, there's a lot of AP classes.
Yeah,
Uh,
we've got some
so
AP
like,
classes.
yeah, so it's like, do we really need to be taking those AP classes? Like, I benefited from them. Obviously, they helped me get into college, but like, would it be better if I like learn how to cook? I mean, I like, would it be better if I learned how to cook? I obviously I went to college, so maybe not. But would it be better if I learned like if I did was only going to graduate high school and then go work a minimum wage job? If I learned how to cook, if I learned how to budget, if I learned how to do my taxes by myself so that I didn't have to pay for TurboTax or
Like that's a like if we were talking about that, I would just it's like a completely separate issue. I would say like no American should have to learn to do their taxes. The government should just do it for you. Like we should not be wasting time on. You just got to do like
yeah,
tax reform. Like there's like yeah, the system as it stands, you guys should probably learn taxes, but it's
yeah,
it's so frustrating that like we have to do our taxes too here, but like it's just big turbo tax is the only reason we have to do it.
I know.
So
I agree with you, but
yeah,
like we should also I think education should be the world we live in, not the world we should live
yeah,
in.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Switching a little bit more to university, do you think that every university, no matter what major you are, should require like some sort of debate class?
Yeah, probably. I think something I'm like one of the easiest things I think you can do is just like during Frosh week. I think you should have like a 1 hour like assembly or something on basically the importance of like free speech. You guys
Right.
care so much about your First Amendment, like you should at least talk about that a little bit about university, um, because it's just become such a contentious issue. It deserves to be talked about, and in Canada too. Um, just a little bit about like the value of different ideas and being able to like have a discourse with people that you disagree with. I'm sure there are good ways to do that that you can basically make people participate because like do you guys ever have mandatory things for like Frosh Week? Like I think you guys already do some like instructional things anyways.
No, you have to do them
Or
like
like
if
it's
the
all optional, I guess.
it's all optional, or like you do it online before you even get there.
Okay. Well then I would say maybe you should do the online and the real life one. Like I feel somewhat strongly about this that that's an oxymoron, isn't it? I feel strongly about this that the students should have a good idea of how to deal with disagreeable ideas the second they get in university. Because a lot of the time in high school, like I didn't really have to deal with any controversial ideas, or like I did, but it wasn't because of high school. It was because of like my friends or like books I read outside of high school. So like I think once you get to like the university environment, like it should just be instilled from you during Frosh Week that like you're gonna hear some things you disagree with. The world's complicated. The world's a scary place. Deal with it.
Yeah,
Be ready to debate. Be ready to debate Charlie Kirk in your second year.
Yeah, I yeah, I think that I had a really good college for debating for some reason, even though they did try to hide the fact that Ben Shapiro was showing up at my college.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was so I talked about in the podcast where you interviewed me a second ago. I talked about the good professor that tricked us all by making us answer a question and then debate about it and then reveal the answer to the multiple choice question. Um, but then I'll tell you about the bad version. I took a rock and American music history class, and he would constantly ask us questions and then judge us for like our answers, even
like
if we like
judging you on
didn't
your
know
music
the
taste.
context.
That's funny.
Not
Or
not the music taste, but like there was one time when like he was talking about Michael Jackson not being able to be on MTV because he's not rock, right?
hmm,
And so he asked, like, okay, well, if MTV is for rock, should Michael Jackson be on MTV, right? And we're like, okay, well, if it's for rock, like, no, like, then that's what they wanted, that was their prerogative back then. Michael Jackson's like not rock, like, okay, cool.
right.
And then he'd slowly answer these questions and slowly would convert us into like, yes, MTV is being racist, right?
Yeah.
Because at the very end he shows us like the first music video that was ever played on MTV, which is like "Video Killed the Radio Star," and it's if you anyone who's ever heard that song, it's not a rock song. And by then it was literally 100% of us were like, I see the game that's being played here, right? But he like shamed us for like a good like 10 minutes. Like there was no debate of like, well, I do think a channel should be able to say that they just want to play rock. Like what if they're just, what if they're playing, I think Jimi Hendrix is the best guitarist of all time, and he's black. Like he's black, he's a rocker. I would play him on my if I had a rock channel, I'd be playing Jimi Hendrix like every day. Like what do you
Right.
mean? Yeah. Yeah, like there is a world where that those two things could be true. You could be not being racist and you could be you just want to play rock music. But like he shamed us for that. There was no discussion about if that was acceptable or not.
Yeah. Definitely a bad way to do it. I don't
Yeah.
like the stick approach to debating. Yeah. To finish the other point, I think that's why I don't know if you do one specific mandatory debate class, just because maybe it's hard to do well, but maybe you could. I think it's a little bit better to incorporate that into every class, and I talked about that in the last video. But it's just I think you find ways that you can incorporate it into assignments and like participation grades. Like you make certain assignments where you come up with like different ideas, and then maybe you have to defend an idea that is like not your own, or you have to like have an opinion. Like I don't know, like maybe you have to defend slavery. Like that would be a very valuable tactic to have, because most people are anti-slavery nowadays. But it's an interesting intellectual argument to come up with the steel man for why slavery is good. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
that can be a clickbait title. Or if I was a big enough streamer, I would clip myself out of context and that'd be funny. But like, it's a very valuable skill to have, to be able to steel man arguments that you disagree with, and there are ways that you can incorporate that into a lot of non-STEM classes, and even some of the STEM classes that would be very valuable for the issues we're talking about.
Yeah, again, to relate it to martial arts because I'm like a broken record. Um, like knowing the technique your opponent is using against you
Know thine
makes
enemy.
yeah, exactly. Makes it infinitely easier to defend it, right? If I know, like, you know, if I'm doing an Americana, I have to get his elbow to touch his ribs, right? And then I can crank it, and then it's a way easier submission. Okay, well, then I'm just gonna stick my elbow up, and maybe he'll still get the submission, but at least it'll be harder, right? He has to crank it a lot more than if it's right here. It's like this already hurts, so it's like okay,
Right.
I know what he has to do, right? So like, yeah, point being, steel manning your opponent's argument is like actually a lot better in hammering home your own argument, right? You'll start to figure out the weaknesses in your argument. You'll be able to go, oh, this fact is not very useful. Okay, like what can I switch it out with that might make my whole system of belief a little bit better?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, that's good for that point.
Okay. Um, and then uh, is it good for everyone to be a critical thinker?
I think so.
Okay.
I I mean, like in moderation, yes. Like the big thing I would have is like, is it good for everyone to be like a critic? No, but it's good for everyone to be able to have the capacity to critique and to be critical about certain ideas, um, and to be able to arrive at new ideas themselves without someone having to give them those ideas. But yeah, like for sure, we like not everyone is going to become a critical thinker just because it is not the natural state. It's like you just have to understand whenever you're talking about critical thinking, it's not something that comes to you naturally. It is a very uncomfortable phenomenon, and I talk about this in my information landscape video. It's one of my favorite ones that I did actually, but I
That's the one I want to watch next.
yeah, I have to
Okay.
make like a better thumbnail for that one, or I have to make a better descriptor of it because there's so many people that just have such a bad idea of this. So I can sit up in my chair because I'm angry, but it's like Elon thinks, or there's some people that say this phrase that more speech or the solution to hate speech or bad speech or misinformation is not censorship or is not less speech, it's more speech, which is like it's just like so stupid just because they think that like everyone is like a natural critical thinker or that like truth has some inherent capacity to just like rise to the top, but it's just like not true. It's like there's just so much noise and signal in these areas, and there's so much noise and signal in our own brains that like truth does not rise to the top. It's we tend to believe the things that make us comfortable and align us with like a certain tribe, and like we believe the things that we already believe. Like we have a reinforcement bias or confirmation bias. So everyone should become a critical thinker, but it is not the expectation that everyone will be. If that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that has been like that has been a criticism I've received when I've been trying to talk about how frustrating it is that like we don't teach every school student to come out and be like information seeking or like kind of like critical thinking basically is. And they've been like, well, someone has to work at 7-Eleven. It's like, well, why shouldn't the 7-Eleven worker like understand what's going on in the world? Like, I think that's probably good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the opportunity or it's the quality of opportunity versus quality of outcome. Like everyone should have the chance to become a critical thinker, but not everyone
Yeah.
will be. And like you should not be like forcing everyone or like you shouldn't make voting dependent on critical thinking is like something I would say.
No, no, no.
Like even if you can't critical think, even if you can't evaluate or come up with your like new ideas or whatever, like if you have to listen to someone else that you trust
Yeah.
to take your ideas, then that's fine. You still get to vote.
Yeah. My wife's not
Just
to
your
the
vote
same.
counts less.
My wife's not a citizen yet, and it's been one of her frustrations, like learning about like voting because she's from Dubai, right? She was born in Dubai. Um, so and but she's a non-resident citizen of India, so she can neither vote in India, nor can she. That Dubai is a kingdom, so there's no voting.
Right.
Um, so it's been very frustrating for her. She's like, how can you have all this power and you don't even look up what the hell all these candidates like? Why are there people the day after the election looking up what a tariff is, right? That
Yeah.
voted for Trump. It's like how could you have all this awesome power that I never got and um and waste it now? And I have to explain to her because she's like, we should make it so that they have to take a test to vote. If they can't pass the test, they can't. I'm like, listen, I understand, but that historically that's not been used, to
Historically, it's usually been more about disenfranchisement than enfranchisement, and yeah,
right.
generally, I'm in favor of the latter. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we had. And she's like, yeah, you're right. I know.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna use it to not let certain types of people vote. I'm like, yeah, I know exactly. Now you're
Yeah.
getting it. Yeah. Um, but do you think that like leftists have a religion, or even liberals? You know,
Um. Yeah, for sure. It's different. Yeah, I'll just say yeah. Like there can be like scientism like can be a religion. Like there can be like just like an over reliance on like um certain ideologies that like socialism versus capitalism that like they'll just like take for granted, and like they'll think that like socialism or some like policy or even some like person maybe is their god or deity, and like the use of the word religion will like lose some people in this topic. So you just have to have a little when you're talking to these people or when you're accusing some leftists of like being religious, like you have to nail them down on it because they have a lot of the same like ideological beliefs that are unchangeable, like a lot of the religious people that they would criticize for. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but like it's not like one side of the political spectrum is like more vulnerable to religion or ideology. Like it just manifests itself in different ways. Like leftists are just as just as just as inclined towards like tribal thinking and religious level thinking. It's they just hide it better sometimes.
yeah, I that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if they get resistant to being if they have a resistance to calling it religion, maybe call it like orthodoxy. Is that a better term
Yeah,
or
I mean, you'll lose some people too, just that don't know what orthodoxy means. But,
okay.
but yeah,
Yeah,
there's it's fine. Like they engage in like cultish behaviors too. Like they'll shun out groups and
right.
they have certain beliefs that like you have to adhere to, otherwise you're bad. So it's just yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's been interesting watching that because I feel like the the leftists have been getting almost more religious, and the conservatives have maybe been getting less religious in America. If the, if that makes
um,
sense.
what do you mean by the conservatives getting less religious?
You can believe whatever you want as long as Donald Trump is your god emperor.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
Okay, because it's like they might be getting like less Christian because they elected Trump, but they're still just getting. I would say both extremes are just getting more religious, and they're getting more polarized. They're getting more entrenched in their beliefs because of the nature of the algorithms and like the echo chambers.
in some ways, I think that in some ways conservatives are just like, as long as you believe that Trump should be the president right now, and like you're on our team, and you don't have to believe anything of any of the same things as me. If
Yeah,
that makes
I would
sense.
say that the conservative religious tent has gotten larger,
Yeah.
and that's why they won the election because they were able to moderate a little bit on some religious beliefs, like the abortion thing, for example. Like Trump denounced he said he wouldn't veto, or he said he would veto a national abortion ban, which I believe because I don't think Trump has a particularly strong stance on abortion. I don't think he has a particularly strong stance on anything that he's just like a narcissist. So like the tent's gotten bigger, but yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then how can we make liberalism sexy?
That's the $1 billion question, isn't it?
Because like
um,
leftism seems to be sexy, and conservatism seem to be sexy. Like what?
hmm.
How do we get people that want to be on our team?
You have to give me like a year or two of making video essays, and then I'll have the answer to that question.
Okay.
But yeah, I think some of it will just come as like a natural pendulum swing. Actually, is the nice thing.
Okay.
Like because right now like being an extremist is like sexy, but like it'll just naturally happen that like as the populist president gets some power, he's going to surround himself with a lot of like we can obviously see with his cabinet picks like he's going to surround himself with a lot of just incompetent, ineffectual, unqualified people, and they all have like different interests, so they're all going to like battle against each other, and like they're going to do some like devastating stuff like the deportations or whatever, but like they're not going to do anything particularly great for the American people, I think. And I think people are
Right.
going to start to realize that, and then the pendulum will end up coming back to the center a little bit. And I think it's mostly about capitalizing on that. And I guess one of the big takeaways that a lot of the liberals are taking away from this election is that yeah, like we need to be like more sexy, and in order to do this, like we have to it's a communications problem. We have to become more comfortable going on Joe Rogan and like the comedians podcast. So, like we are sounding out of touch. We're perhaps we're using the language of the elite. We have some kind of like elitist values, and we're just and we're shunning too many people. We're being very stick, not very carrot. So
Mhm.
maybe that's one of the big things. I think the big answer is not so much just about like the ideology. Like we're not making liberalism more sexy. I think I think you as an individual that believes in liberalism, I think liberals have to become more sexy. Like it's
Oh.
about modeling behavior. Like you have to become a better person, like a better like making friends and better at articulating yourself, better at talking to people that don't have the same beliefs as you. Um, and better at like telling stories. I think in order to make liberalism sexy again, liberals have to be better at making friends and telling really good stories, and then
Okay.
that's how they're gonna bring it back in 2026 and 2028.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that of myself. Like I'm pretty sure I'm a little on the spectrum. Um,
Like on
uh,
left to right or ASD.
the ASD.
Yeah.
Um, where like I do have problems communicating like non-technical things, right? So like when I'm communicating like something in science, I'm gaining the skills pretty quickly about how to like communicate how I did my experiment and stuff like that. And same with jujitsu. Like that's the martial art I've done the longest. I am I'm very good at being like, okay, this is the exact intricacies of like how you need to perform this technique, or it's not gonna work. Um, but when it comes to putting together the story, right? Like even for like some of my experiments, like what the story of the experiment is versus the technical details, like I do struggle with that. And the same
Hmm.
with policy. Like I can explain to you all the stats of why this policy should work, and da, da, da. But then when it comes to okay, let's tie it together so like a normal person who's like not really super engaged can understand. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like, how do I do this? Like when I'm talking to my mom, like I can't do this in 3 sentences. I can do this in
Yeah.
like an hour talk about why you should do this. Yeah.
It seems to be the case though. Like we're very good at like circle jerking each other. Basically, we're very
Yeah.
good and we enjoy talking to the people that like already think like us.
Mhm.
But obviously, that's just like not how you win elections.
Right.
There's a case that you have to make for a broader tent party that doesn't necessarily share all of the same values, but maybe they share like 78 or 80% of them, and you can disagree on the other 20%, and they'll still vote for your party anyways. So I think it's kind of about that. Like it's not like we have to like shed like the transgender discourse, or like we have to like or like we have to become like pro-life or whatever. Like there's still some principles that like the Democrats can like hold to and should hold to. Um, it's mostly a communications problem of, I think, like a lot of Harris and Biden's communications. But I guess we'll go with Harris specifically because it was her campaign. Drilled a little bit too hard on policy, but like in order to get to the policy discussion, you have to do like the small talk. You have to get the people on your side before you can even have the policy debate. And like Trump never had the policy debate. He did all the small talk. He did all the slogans. He did all the podcast stuff. So and he got people to decide, and then there was no policy to debate to be had. He had concepts of a plan. He still has concepts of a plan. Like he has no policy.
The other day,
The actual policy he had to denounce because his policy is Project 2025. But yeah, it's interesting because it's not that we should give up on the policy debate. We're just getting a little bit too far ahead of ourselves and forgot the earlier steps, I guess.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch people be like, yeah, Kamala doesn't have any policies. And I was like, what? That's all she talks about. Because like if you've ever heard her speak, that's like the only thing she ever talks about is her policies. Like, what are you talking about? It was very interesting to me. And I had the epiphany while you were saying that, like, oh, they didn't even get that far. Like, they didn't even watch any of her stuff.
Yeah, it's like, well, think about how would get the content for the Kamala rally, right? Like we might actually like tune into the live or something, or we might watch a more complete video or read an article about her remarks, so we would actually know about like what policy she has. But if you're just like a conservative or like a low information voter that doesn't care about things, or that doesn't care about like the election or like political stuff, especially, not that they don't care about things, it's just very, very brief snippets. It's like you get like her misspeaks, like you just get like the shorts. You don't get what Kamala said. You get what Joe Rogan said Kamala said, or you get, like some second or third or fourth order interpretation. And then yeah, if you get that, then yeah, she doesn't have policy. But it's not because she doesn't have policy. It's because you're hearing it from like this dumb place, or you're just not looking for it. But I can't really blame them for that because like you shouldn't really have to do that much digging to get to the policy, I guess. There's a certain level of there's a balance to be struck between like individual responsibility. Like maybe individuals should have to like do the test, or like democracy depends on informed citizens. So obviously there's a bare minimum that we can expect of citizens to do their research and like decide on like what candidates or policies that they like better. But also it's on the campaign to tell that story and tell that message and make sure that's available to the public. And for most of the time, I feel like Kamala was not doing that well. Like she was more preaching to the choir. And then like the one time she went on the podcast, it was like call her daddy. And it's like most of those listeners probably already agree with you anyways. You got to go even further. You got to go on like Fox News, or well, she did actually go on Fox. You got to go on. You got to talk to Charlie Kirk. You got to go on Tucker Carlson. You got to get in there. You got to debate lord these guys. You got to crush them.
Right. That is one of the, like, I think Gavin Newsom might be too much of an establishment Democrat to win in 2028. But if he does get the nomination, that is the direction I think Gavin Newsom needs to go. Is he needs to become the ultimate debate lord.
Yeah.
Like he can't just be like, yes, I am establishment Democrat number 535. Like he needs to just like, okay, this is the vibe for Gavin Newsom, is that if you step on stage with him, you'll get eviscerated.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's my. Yeah.
That's why my favorite politician right now is Pete Buttigieg, just because he's gone on Fox so much, and he's gone on a lot of the right wing podcasts and talked to people and had contentious debates with people, and he's able to articulate his ideas and the things he's done as a minister of transportation, and like he's done a really good job. And liberals and Democrats aren't good enough at like celebrating their accomplishments. Like Biden did a lot, and now unfortunately Trump is going to take credit for them. But I don't think it's an interesting difference because Harris was trying to like separate herself. She was both trying to separate herself from the administration and arguably failed, but like she also separated herself from like the successes of that administration, or like she never claimed them. Biden didn't ever really claim them either, or like when he did, it was through like a press release that like no one ever sees, or like I guess he did it a little bit in the State of the Union, but like a lot of the projects that he did, like the infrastructure bill and all the like the COVID relief stuff, that I think he did very well on, given given how divided the people in the Senate were, right? Like it's a miracle he was able to get so much passed with like that close to Senate. He really had to do like the bipartisan stuff and make what's it called, make consolations.
Oh no,
What's the C word?
coalitions.
Yeah, make coalition. Like yeah, he made good coalitions and had good cooperation with the Republicans that would end up voting for his bills, and that's something that should be celebrated and he should be admired for. But the funny thing is that he won't be. He'll be a good president for the history books, but unfortunately, like the public is going to feel so poorly about his legacy now, just because people didn't do a good enough job talking about his legacy. The lefties were busy like infighting, or they're too busy doing like self-flagellation or like arguing over what they should do next, rather than celebrating doing some things. And maybe it makes sense because if you celebrate, then you seem like out of touch. But I think everyone sees it. Like it's just such a hard line to cross, or such a hard line to walk.
Yeah, it is, and I think there's a lot of strategic problems, but let's move on a little bit there because I think we're almost out of time. Oh Jesus, we're out of time.
Yeah.
Okay. Last point. You said that city centers are leaving behind smaller towns. This is something I really want to like have your opinion on. How do we not do that? It seems almost impossible.
It probably has a little bit to do with like multi-purpose towns. Like we have a lot of smaller towns in Canada where it's like mining communities, or like maybe like nursing home communities. But it's like really hard to say what to do with those towns. Like once you don't need like the gold or copper anymore, or once the mines run out, it's like sometimes like you should actually just leave those small towns behind because there's no industry there. Like there's no reason to be there. You drain the lake or whatever. Like you can move on. It's okay to move on sometimes, but also brain drain is a thing, and it is destroying smaller areas. And maybe there are good reasons to have those smaller communities that can. It has mostly to do with like public infrastructure and building those communities. Like something we have for like Northern Ontario specifically. Like I'm kind of from like a rural area. Like it's still a city, but like rural compared to Southern Ontario. And what the Ontario government does is basically like it's things like tourism credits, and like they'll pay like doctors like highly skilled professions more. They'll give them like certain like Northern Ontario grants, because obviously like all the money's in like Southern Ontario or like the urban areas, but like the government can do a little bit to incentivize all the high skilled people to stay in these kinds of smaller communities and kind of build up their reputation and infrastructure and whatnot. I think it's the best answer I have for that. Just like rural area tax credits, things like that.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't have an answer. I don't have anything to add because I didn't have an answer at all. Okay. Is there anything you want to shout out? Anything you want to highlight? Anything like that?
That's good. I'm optimistic about university. So things will get a lot worse actually before they get better. But I'm optimistic in the long term. I'm optimistic filled. So I want people to like kind of take that from this and think about some of the solutions we've talked about. And like it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard, but it's not all doom. Just think outside of the box a little bit, and there are solutions to be had. And watch my upcoming videos, and I'll try my best to optimism pill you.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, please subscribe. He's got some great videos. I'm super excited to watch that information landscape one. yeah, thanks for showing up, and thanks for everyone at home for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the noti bell, all that good stuff. Okay, see you later.
Thanks.
Okay.